Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this first Fireside chat by Supportful. I'm Fadi Boulos, founder of Supportful. We are a software engineering staff augmentation company. We work with international tech companies. We provide them with remote software engineers who would help them build their MVP from zero to one or scale their products. We are on a mission to reduce the brain drain in Lebanon and make sure that every one of our engineers works from their hometown so they can contribute to the local development of their economy in a sustainable fashion, aiming to create a sustainable economy at the national level. Today, we have with us Nahi Ojeil. He's a senior VP of technology at CaptivateIQ, formerly a staff engineer at Google and the senior director of engineering at Dropbox, among many other tenures. And we're happy to have him to talk about his journey, the latest in tech, and his advice to software engineers who want to make a great career. Nahi, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Fadi. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Maybe not many people know that we know each other maybe for the past month or two, and it's great that you want to contribute and give back to the community by sharing your story. So let's start
Yeah.
from the beginning. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, no,
you
absolutely. I just wanted to say, I've always been inspired by what you are doing, and that was basically the first connection was just seeing what you're trying to do for the great talent in Lebanon, and just wanted to make sure that more people like myself are hopefully able to contribute and support that mission. So yeah, again, very excited for
Thank you,
everything you're doing, and looking forward to the conversation.
thank you, Nahi. So yeah, let's start off with the beginning. So you were a student at AUB, and then next thing we know, you're at Google. So
Yeah,
tell us a
so
bit about that part.
I was born in Lebanon and spent most of my early life in Lebanon, and eventually went to AUB as a student. I was a computer and communications engineering student there, and towards the end of my time, I was trying to figure out what to do. Do I find a job in Lebanon? Do I move abroad and find a job somewhere else, or do I continue my studies? And eventually, I decided that I had an opportunity to go and do my graduate studies in the U.S. In Michigan, and so I ended up just packing my bag and went on a plane and spent a year and a half doing my graduate studies there. During that period, I got a chance to intern at Google. It's very common here when you're a student to get a lot of hands-on experience, especially given all the available companies around you that are eager to provide that opportunity for interns, but also are always looking for great talent. So I interned there. I really enjoyed just being in a company that's building breaking edge technology, building great products, and eventually I decided that that's where I wanted to work. So ended up converting from an intern to a full-time engineer at Google, working on their ads infrastructure team. So that was my just journey going from Lebanon to graduate school in the US, and then from there, eventually starting my first software engineering job at Google. I was there for about 3.5 years, and eventually I had an opportunity to join what at the time was a very small company called Dropbox. It had a couple hundred people compared to the tens of thousands of people at Google that I was one of. And I just jumped on that opportunity. It was a lot of great people, a lot of great opportunities and projects there, and ended up actually spending about 8 years at Dropbox, growing with the company and seeing it evolve from a couple hundred people to 3,000 people in a relatively short period of time. So that was very exciting, and a lot of stories from that period as well. And then, of course, after 8 years, after a lot of just great opportunities and a lot of learning, I ended up going to Captivate IQ as an engineering leader, and now as their head of R&D and technology. Yeah, very very exciting journey, and happy to like share anything in terms of perspectives I developed from that experience. Doesn't have to be always like the exact right answer for others, but at least it could provide a lens into someone's journey, and maybe that's helpful, or hopefully it's helpful for many folks out there.
Sure. And yeah, you mentioned something about growing, from a few dozens of engineers or hundreds to thousands. And do you see a major cultural shift when a company scales this way? And this brings me to a question I wanted to ask about, big tech versus startups. Uh, what would you say about this in terms of different of, culture difference, but also engineering practices differences? Anything you can highlight, because everyone's dream is to work for big tech, but it's also always a good growth opportunity to work for smaller companies. I want to hear your take on
Yeah,
this.
yeah, absolutely. And it's a question I've had to answer for myself as I made these decisions for my career. um, big tech is predictable, right? When you go to a Google, when you go to a Microsoft, that it's stable company. They figured out a lot of things, so you can go and really absorb a lot. You can learn a lot from just seeing how they built their technology. The flip side of that is it's a big company. It's already established in the way things are, and that makes it sometimes a little bit more challenging to be able to influence and to shape what the company looks like, what the culture looks like, even sometimes what the technology or the product looks like. So it's a great opportunity to go learn, and see what those companies have had to go through to get to that stage. But it comes with a little bit more rigidity in that it's a big company. Things have to be done in a certain way, and as an individual, it's harder to be able to change that. You have to fit in versus you get to shape what that company evolves into. When you look at a smaller company, there's a lot more risk, obviously, because the company is maybe going to keep growing, maybe not. There's a lot more uncertainty, which you wouldn't have with a big tech company. But what comes with that uncertainty is a lot more sense of ownership, ability to have impact, influence, growth opportunity. If you can imagine, when a company is growing fast, it's easier for them to take a bet on their existing talent, to put them in bigger positions, give them bigger opportunities, because it takes more time to go and hire externally, train them up, decide like, are they actually a right fit or not. So oftentimes you get a lot more people being put in bigger positions, and that helps accelerate their growth and their journey. So on the one hand, it's potentially a faster path for growth. You get to learn a lot more, but on the flip side, you have the risk, and also you might go through periods where there aren't as many things that have been done very well. There's things that are being done quickly because you have to move very quickly, but you might not get as much of that interaction with others who've been through a lot more experiences and have gotten the company to a place that's very stable, that many companies ultimately aspire to get to. So maybe like there's no right answer. I think each experience provides something very valuable. I feel lucky to have gotten both. But I would say, yeah, on the one hand, you get to learn a lot from what's happened in the past, but it'll be hard to shape it in the future. On the other hand, you get to shape a lot, but maybe there isn't as much of a past for that company in order to go in and uh, learn from it. It's all about the future.
Okay, and is it usually a one-way thing? So usually people start with big tech and then they go to startups, or it also happens the other way around?
No, it's either direction, and honestly, the some of the best engineers that I've worked with are those that have had both experiences. So I think there's value in, and my philosophy is usually building perspectives is super valuable, because if you only look at things from one angle, you're very limited in terms of how you think creatively about solving problems, and how you think creatively about where you can take your product and your company. So, and it doesn't have to be experiencing big and small tech. It could be other experiences that contribute to you having a more diverse experience and lens to look at the world, and gives you maybe more creativity and ability to solve problems in ways that others might not have been able to.
Yeah, definitely having a team with members from diverse backgrounds. I think it's an asset, and
Absolutely.
I think diversity works well everywhere. Nature loves diversity. In finance, you have to diversify your portfolio. So I think it's the right thing to do. So in terms of the different positions that you were in, maybe you can explain a bit what a staff software engineer does. What's the difference between director of engineering and vice president of engineering? What's EPD actually, which is part of your current title? If you can tell us a bit about the responsibilities in each role, and because these titles are not very frequent in Lebanon, I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, so maybe I'll start with staff engineer. And usually, as a staff engineer, you're an individual contributor. You're not a manager, but you're viewed as a very senior engineer. And the responsibilities as a staff engineer start spanning beyond the team that you're on. And so, if you look at as you develop as an individual contributor, you usually look at the scope you have in terms of like responsibilities. You look at the amount of complexity you're able to deal with and how much you can look into the future and plan into the future. So as a staff engineer, you're working across multiple teams, which means you're working on projects that span a much broader set of
Mm.
parts of the technology and the product. And then you're working on things that hopefully span 6, 12 months in terms of complexity. So that's usually when you're a staff engineer, you start getting to that level of impact and scope and level of complexity that you're working with. Um, so that's usually like one of the hard to get to levels as an individual contributor, and not everyone gets to that level. Oftentimes, people stay within a team and continue to contribute very well within the team, but that next step, is very impactful, but also it's one that's harder to get to typically. Um, Once you move into the management track, uh, you go from managing a team to eventually managing a larger set of teams. And that's the progression from being a manager to ultimately a director of engineering, where you're not only responsible for one team, you're responsible for a whole area. You're responsible for the bigger strategy, for the product and technical strategy, for the people strategy, the culture strategy. And at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. You're accountable for making that part of the organization successful. And the more you grow, the more responsibility you have. And ultimately, as a vice president, your responsibilities become not only to the area that you're responsible for, but in some way to the whole company, to the function. So to shaping what does it mean to be an engineer at a company, and not just how do you go and deliver on projects or on features and technology. So you start looking more holistically at engineering and even more outward into the world and shaping your brand as an engineering organization. Um, what does EPD mean? So in a lot of places in the US, when you are building a product, you usually have three key functions that contribute to that. There's other functions that contribute as well, but the three main ones are engineering, product management, and product design. And so usually you'll see the acronym EPD used when you're referring to those three functions together. It's the same as saying R&D. But yeah, basically EPD is usually when someone's responsible for the engineering, the product management, as well as the product design and the UX, all of those together.
Okay. And is it the term borrowed from traditional manufacturing, or is it specific to tech?
So it's more specific to tech, or at least it's been refined a little bit for tech. With in manufacturing, you'll see some of these terms used, and maybe this acronym might show up with different words behind the E, P, and D, but it's more of a tech specific term that you'll hear, especially here in the US.
Okay, and along the same lines, Christoph is asking question about. So one part we answered, which is the difference between engineering manager, staff engineer, principal engineer, and a general question about the new something engineer titles constantly popping up, and a follow-up question on the specific engineering expertise that is needed and the constant needs for generalist engineers.
Yeah. So I would say maybe I'll start with the comment around the generalist engineer. Uh, I think that the role of generalist engineer is always going to be there. It's probably the most core, and there's a reason I say that. Every company you go to is going to have a different set of needs,
Mm.
right? And you could specialize a lot in one area, become an expert in it, and that's great because it demonstrates that you can become an expert once you've learned something. But you'll go to another company, and the reality is there's going to be different challenges, different constraints. And so your ability as an engineer to adapt, learn, and figure out ways to be successful and impactful in a different environment is super critical. And that applies from a soft skills perspective. It also applies from a hard skills perspective. So as an engineer, and when I think of a generalist, it's really someone who's able to pick up on front end technologies, back end technologies. Maybe they can dive in areas that are needed at the time. And to me, that's very important and valuable. And in fact, most companies would likely look for these generalists, especially early on, but even later on, because they know that they can leverage them in different places and that they will adapt to the needs of the business and the team. So, about the titles, so I would differentiate, titles that correspond to what your level is. And, when you look at any engineering department, you look at people's experience and expectations based on a leveling system that goes from, let's say, a junior to a mid-level to a senior to a staff principal and beyond. So that doesn't really say if your specialty is front end or DevOps or generalist. It's mostly representing the level of ability that or expectation that the company has of you and the level of impact that they expect you to have. So it's really more a representation of your expectation, your level of competency, and those are usually pretty standard across most companies. When you start going into titles about what your specialty is, I'm sure those there's a much wider range from people making up titles to a lot of specialties that have been around for a long time. So yeah, so when you think of staff engineer, it's not a representation of are you a front end engineer or a back end engineer or a DevOps. It's really what's the level of expectation and experience that this person has.
Okay, and regarding the generalist engineering thing, and it's a question that I get asked a lot by fresh grads or junior engineers. Should we know so many tech stacks, or should we focus on one? Because I think, in most companies, there's a culture of I need someone to do me this. I don't want a generalist, at least in the early stages of their career.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong. And what's your take on this? What would be your advice
yeah,
to these junior engineers?
yeah. I mean, to me, it's one thing to be generalist in terms of your ability, but you have to be good at something, right? And so my advice usually for people early in their career is, you have to be good at something. And let's say from a tech stack perspective, if Python is your language and you enjoy it, great, become good at that and show that competency so that when people are evaluating you for roles, even if maybe what they need is someone who's a Java developer, or maybe their stack is going to evolve over time. But again, this is based on my experience. Just make sure you're good at something, and if you're able to demonstrate that you're good at Python, people will trust that you'll be able to pick up a different language and become good at that. Now, there's always exceptions where the needs of the business are, I need a Java developer today. I can't wait for someone to learn it for the next 6 months. And those examples exist everywhere. So this doesn't apply universally across every single opportunity. But overall, I would focus a little bit less on um, agonizing about which language do you learn first versus pick a language, become good at it, show competency, show real examples of you using that technology to build real things. And if you're able to do that, at least I know a lot of companies that would assess you based on your competency there. And if they see that you've been able to learn and demonstrate that skill, they know that you're going to be able to learn a different thing and be just as successful there.
Okay. Yeah, it makes perfect sense. I mean, they need to stand out at
Yeah,
some point, and
yeah,
then from there on.
yeah.
Um, can we take a quick and brief technical turn and maybe get an overview about the delivery process at Captivate IQ, in terms of delivery, uh, whatever you can say about it that is not confidential, would be happy to hear.
Yeah, I would say what we do is very similar to what you see with a lot of early stage growing companies. And a lot of the focus is on, how do we, you know, build product as fast as possible while maintaining as many guardrails and protection in our software development lifecycle. And so what that means is you have, first of all, an open code base that, everyone in the engineering team has access to. So there's no silos. And people are usually writing code, they're running tests constantly. So we have our continuous integration system, which every time you not only submit your code and merge it back into your branch, to the main branch, you're always running tests. Even when you send it out for review, tests run. So like this emphasis on constant and continuous testing is very important. So that's always happening. It's an open code base. Everyone's contributing. And then our focus is on how do we ship code all the time, while having the right set of feature flags to protect our customers from maybe early stage features that are not ready to be shown to customers yet, but are still under development. And all of that is, again, like very, very rapid pace. We use a lot of technologies that are, we use one of the big cloud vendors for running our product, for running our testing, our deployment process, and all of that. Um, and yeah, those are generally like the tenets, like open code base, very rapid development, continuous testing, and deploy as frequently as possible while protecting your customers from maybe features that are early, and we'll turn those features on when they're ready, and we have that full control over when features get turned on or off for our customers.
Okay.
And you'll see that trend almost anywhere.
Yeah, it's really the DevOps mindset, which is more of a mindset, but also a role. And
Yep.
many engineers wonder. I mean, there's no. I mean, in most universities, there is no DevOps. You don't graduate as a DevOps engineer. And so, what would be the thing that engineers need to do to qualify as DevOps engineers, especially when they're early on in their career? Nahi, did we lose you for a second?
You're back.
Yeah. So, did you hear my question?
I heard the beginning of it.
Yeah. So I was talking about the DevOps mindset, and
Yeah,
which is also, I mean, a role that someone can work in. And many people ask about the requirements to qualify as a DevOps engineer, especially when they're early on in their career.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, the DevOps role has become very popular in the last, I would say, decade or so. And for people who are interested early on, first of all, maybe like don't put too much pressure on yourself. Like you can always evolve, and the thing that I see, given how dynamic the role of engineering is, you have people moving from one discipline to another constantly. And so, first of all, like, if you start somewhere, you'll always have the opportunity to evolve and shift more in that direction. And I've seen that happen, a lot in my career. Now, for those that really want to try to get into DevOps early on, I think a lot of the the skills are going to be how have you like experienced and demonstrated competency in to some degree writing software, but also seeing it end to end through its life cycle, which is testing, releasing, and then ultimately supporting in production, versus focusing only on writing code and assuming that something's going to happen to that code and it's someone else's problem. So how do you become someone who understands that full end-to-end journey and knows how to support that software once it's actually running in production and getting in the hands of users? And there it's, do you have like projects you've developed? Do you have internships where you've gotten exposure to that at least? Are there tools that you can learn? Are there certifications you can take? So a lot of it is how do you show that you've gotten some degree of hands-on experience, even if it's not in school, maybe it's in an internship, maybe it's in certifications, maybe it's in projects you own, you've run, and you have some users, even if it's a handful, where you're still able to run that role end to end and demonstrate your some degree of understanding and hands-on experience with it.
Yeah, so it requires quite some ownership of the whole SDLC
Absolutely, yeah,
cycle. And
absolutely.
so Jana has a question about the skills that an engineer should focus on to become a manager. What's your take on this?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and it's one that honestly, a lot of people get to a certain point where they start having that question because there's a path. Either you get to a point where you want to move into management, or you get to a point where you want to stay as an individual contributor and have impact through that way. It's maybe I'll start with like one piece that is a misunderstanding. It's that if you're an individual contributor, you're no longer working through people. You're maybe in a corner somewhere, but you're like very good or very fast at typing code. And that's not what, let's say, a staff or a principal engineer looks like. Even as a staff or a principal engineer, you're working a lot through people. As I mentioned, as a staff engineer, you're working across multiple teams. You have to influence, you have to get people together, you have to lead and show the direction for the technology. So there's still a lot of people elements required to be very senior engineer at a company. Because sometimes I hear people that like, I like working with others. Does that mean I should be a manager? And the reality is, part of your job will be working with others, even if you're an individual contributor. So what does it mean to be a manager? What it means to be a manager is you're taking that one step further, and your role is now evolving into you're responsible for the people. And not only are you working with people or mentoring them, because those are expectations of a staff engineer as well, you're now responsible for people's careers. And that means you have to assess if people are, doing well, if they're struggling, how to help them. You need to think about, is the culture on the team the right one? So there's a lot more things that become more around the mechanics of running a team versus just working with people. Obviously, working with people is a big part of it, and if that's not something you enjoy, then being a manager will be difficult. But again, like it's not just about being good at and enjoying working with people. It's also wanting to focus more on the mechanics of running a team and coordinating the work that this team is doing relative to the rest of the department. Um, and those are things you start getting a better sense of as you get either exposure to it or as you get opportunities to do parts of those jobs, because maybe your manager is investing in you and is giving you a taste of what it could be to be in the manager position. And that gives you a little bit more insight into, do you actually enjoy those things, or do you not? So my, what I've seen usually is, if you are someone who enjoys some of those more mechanical parts of running a team, and you enjoy the people side and you're good at it, that's probably a good direction for you to go into management as you're convening. Now, the big advice I say here is, don't go into management too early, because you're still a technical manager at the end of the day. And if you don't have enough experience as an engineer, it's going to be very hard for you to coach, mentor engineers who are reporting to you, it's very hard for you to have enough perspective around how should a project be run or what are the right technical decisions to make sure that your team is making the right decisions at the end of the day. So my advice, don't go too early into management because you need to develop enough of a technical base so that when you do become a manager and you have less time to invest there, that you're still, have enough of that experience that you're able to be an effective technical manager.
Hmm. I want to touch base a bit about the hiring process at Captivate IQ and in general.
Yep.
So, how much emphasis do you put on certifications versus traditional education when hiring software engineers?
Yeah.
I won't go into the education thing because, I mean, myself, I can go on a rant right now, but I want to hear you about this.
um, yeah, so maybe just to start, like the way I've seen at least the hiring processes look like, and at a high level, they look sort of similar, but once you get into the details, maybe they start looking a little bit different. Uh, what usually a lot of companies look for are, one, there's going to be some set of soft skills that are very important for the job, and so there's going to be some level of assessing that. There's going to be some level of assessing for, again, like hard technical competency, and that's going to be either in like coding challenges or some set of problems that are relevant, and then the last one is going to be some level of understanding your background and experience so that they can understand better like your ability, what have you done, what have you seen, how have you had impact, so that there's a better understanding of your strengths, your areas of development, and the scope or the responsibilities you've had before, to see how it would map and match what is needed for this next job. So those are usually like the three buckets, like a little bit of like understanding your experience, learning about soft skills and assessing for them, and then assessing for like hard skills, whether it is a architecture, design, coding, or some other set of requirements there. Now, going back to certifications versus something else, um, oftentimes it's in something like it doesn't matter as long as you're able to show competency and across those dimensions. So if your certifications have helped you become very good at, let's say, data science and or front end engineering or DevOps, then and you're being evaluated on those technical skills and your certifications help you demonstrate those skills, great. Like you're gonna check the box on those dimensions. Maybe you might not have as much of the hands-on experience doing it, so what else can you show from an experience perspective that contributes to showing that you have still the enough of an experience working in the similar type of environment, or maybe mapping like what your responsibilities might look like. So yeah, I've seen less and less emphasis on traditional learning and more emphasis on just evaluate for the skills. However, no matter how you've developed those skills, as long as you can demonstrate that you have them, whether through certification, traditional learning, internships, pet projects, whatever it is, just demonstrate that you have competency, and that's what people will generally look for.
Yeah, I mean, we're in 2023, and I mean, hiring should be really skills based. But unfortunately, so many companies don't do that yet. And
Yeah.
speaking of coding challenges, do you recommend that candidates go and practice on platforms like CoderPad, TestGorilla, HackerRank, LeetCode? I mean, is it a good practice to be there and prepare for the real coding challenge?
Yeah, so the answer here, there's a very wide range of how companies are adapting how they test for what we call these like hard technical skills, right? Whether it's coding or design and so on. Uh, and you'll see people who are very extreme in terms of really testing you on exercises that you'll see a lot more of in elite code type environment.
Hmm.
And for those, like, it will probably be helpful there. On the other hand, there's a lot of companies that are trying to still test for coding skills, thinking, critical thinking, but they're trying to make the exercise as much as possible look more like what your day-to-day job is versus these exercises where if you've seen it
Yeah.
before, you'll do well. And it's not a solved problem. I don't think that anyone has done a great job yet in figuring out how to best assess without having to invest a lot of time, both from the candidate and the company's perspective. But overall, like you need to know how to write code. You need to like be able to think and problem solve on the fly through hopefully like real world type of problems. And a lot of companies are trying to move more into, can you write code that solves these types of problems that are more real versus having you do these like toy exercises that, yeah, if you've seen it once, you'll just spit out the result just because you've practiced it. um,
Yeah. And do you are you seeing more because we have to say something about AI. I mean, it's being mentioned like crazy on earnings calls. So it's a bit of a technical call, and we need to talk about AI. So first off, are you seeing more AI assisted candidates with on take home challenges, or you've only restricted challenges to live challenges?
Yeah. So I've been seeing both. Like, there's some places where they're fully embracing that candidates are going to use this technology.
Hmm.
It's the future. You want them to use it anyway when they join, right? Because if
Sure.
it's going to make them more productive
You
and they're
want
going
it.
to use it in their day-to-day job as much as possible, make the interview process reflect that. So you do see some companies embrace it and they want to see, are you able to take whatever ChatGPT gives you and work with it and fix the issues, because it's not always going to be fully accurate. And on the flip side, you have companies that are against it because, not because they don't think that it's a useful tool, but because they want to try to test like your reasoning abilities a little bit more. They want to test for like your coding abilities at a more isolated way, so that you don't have other factors that are making it hard to know how good are you at just understanding code. So I've seen that wide spectrum. My guess is at some point it will evolve to allowing, or again, this is like my guess and prediction,
Mm.
that most interviews will eventually evolve to allowing you to use technology like that. But the questions and what you're being tested on will evolve to match that type of environment and to still be able to get some signal on what they want you to demonstrate. And maybe the questions become more complex, or maybe there's going to be some way to um, ask you like follow-up questions based on what's being generated and see how you iterate with ChatGPT versus you just answer once and that's the right answer, versus you answer once and then you develop on top of that to build something
Yeah.
on top, and that requires you to have a slightly better understanding. So my guess is it will evolve, but right now it's a little bit all over the place.
Yeah, and AI, I mean, it's already in use in so many technology companies, especially for development, most famously with ChatGPT, but also with Copilot.
Pilot.
And are you integrating any AI aspects for development at Captivate IQ?
Yeah, so we've been both trying to leverage it for internal productivity across the company, with all the all the safety and caution that we should
Yeah.
leverage, because there's still some corner cases where either you might get yourself in trouble, or you might not get the results that you're looking for without careful inspection. But then we're also trying to leverage it in our product. So I think maybe at this point, 5 months ago, we launched our CaptivateIQ Assist, which is basically a co-pilot inside the product that
Yeah.
helps our users use the product. So we've been both trying to integrate it inside our product as well as inside our company to improve the productivity of our engineers, as well as our broader company, not just within engineering, but across marketing and sales and legal and talent, so across the board.
Okay. Maybe one last question. I posted about it a few weeks ago, and it was the top ranking of worst US companies for employee retention. And Apple was number one, Amazon number two, Meta number three, and so the median tenure was around 1.8 years, and I couldn't uh, understand why was this was the case. Any guesses or insights on why would these big tech companies have so low retention rate?
Yeah. So maybe one thing is when you when you look at the average tenure in Silicon Valley or like in tech in general in the US, I haven't looked at the most recent data, but I think the average probably is around 3 years. Maybe now it's a little bit less even, or maybe still around that number. And the reason for that is there's just so many opportunities here. And I think
Mm,
some people uh, see all those opportunities and it always feels like, oh, maybe I can go to this other company. It looks interesting. When there's always this like appeal around you, there's always opportunities. There's always people looking. There's always a company willing to maybe pay you more to move because there was a lot of demand for talent up until obviously the last 18 months, 2 years when the market started changing. So in that environment, there's a lot of appeal because
yeah.
there's all these exciting things. There's a lot of people willing to do whatever it takes to attract, especially people from these larger companies. And that created the environment where the average tenure was 3 years. Now, why is the average tenure even less in those companies? Um, I, I don't know, to be honest, why in particular it would be that way. But um, generally, like when you're a employee at Meta, there's going to be a lot of people going after you to try to recruit you, and maybe there's just a lot more appeal. The other part is, larger companies. It's comfortable sometimes, but also it's hard because if you're ambitious, you want to move more quickly. Sometimes it feels a little bit harder,
Yeah.
and as I mentioned, you have to like fit into how things work there because it's a large
So
company that in its way. And for some people, maybe they get a couple years of experience and then they're ready to go and move somewhere smaller where they have a little bit more opportunity to fit in versus they have to, contort to fit the way things work at some of these
yeah.
companies.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it's and maybe some people just go on their own after a few years in big tech. I mean, the
Absolutely.
entrepreneurial spirit.
Absolutely. Like there's a lot of startups. And last 18 months have been a little bit different and you see a little bit more stability. There's been a lot more layoffs, obviously. So that's affected people. So in that case, the tenure has been, it has been less voluntary for people to change jobs and it's been more involuntary in this case. But yes, I would say like just the war on talent here has been so intense that even if you're happy somewhere, some company is going to figure out a way to dislodge you, and they're going to put a lot of incentives in front of you to do that. And um, sometimes it's the right thing for certain people. Sometimes it's not, because if you've only been 2 years at a company, it's hard to really round out your experience, learn from your mistakes, learn from the company's mistakes, and then use those to eventually get better. And yeah, so uh, yeah, it's been pretty interesting seeing just how much there's demand for talent, at least prior to this downturn.
Mm. Um, Nahi, thank you. I'm just checking if we still have some unanswered questions. Maybe one last piece of advice to young software engineers looking to make a great career remotely, ideally for some, or not necessarily, just a general
Yeah.
piece of advice from you.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think you know, when you look back to COVID, and it was very unfortunate the impact it's had on everyone in the world. Um, the silver lining there is this move towards investing more and more in remote companies, remote employees, has really opened the door for a lot of countries and very talented people across the world. And I've seen that firsthand across South America, across Eastern Europe, where places that in my like career so far I would have never heard people talk about wanting to hire, and suddenly you have not only a few people, you have like entire teams being built there. And with that comes a lot of economic growth for individuals, for the countries. So it's been just fascinating seeing that evolution, and I think that really opens the door for everyone, including in Lebanon, to take advantage of that. Now, what is my advice? I think the Lebanese people are very adaptable and resilient, and I think that's an asset in my opinion. We talked a little bit in earlier about how each company is going to look different. Each project is going to look different. So you want people who are going to be adaptable, who are going to be creative, who are going to be very driven, and that exists in plentitude in Lebanon. So I think um, it's primed for people to take advantage of these opportunity. Keep focusing on developing, your technical skills, and that means if it's certifications, that's great. If it's projects, if it's GitHub projects, whatever it is, just build a footprint that shows that you have the experience and the technical competency. Actually invest in it. Don't just do it because you want to market yourself. Do it because it will make you truly better at these things that you're going to ultimately be leveraging at any job you find. So develop that competency. Don't forget about the soft skills, which I think we're primed to be good at, but that's an equally important part of the job. And yeah, I would say, like, don't forget about the soft skills. Keep investing in your technical skills. However, you're able to focus a lot on hands-on experience, and then also, like, leverage people around you who maybe have been connected to others. There's a lot of great uh, Lebanese engineers across the world, so lean on your network, and hopefully everyone will get great opportunities over the years.
We hope so. Nahi, thanks a lot for being with us today. It was a great and insightful conversation. I enjoyed it, and I hope the audience enjoyed it too, and made will make good use of your insights. So we wish you all the best, and we hope to see you in Lebanon soon. And we'll meet hopefully on another fireside chat in a few months.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you again for setting this up. It's been fun getting to have this conversation. Hopefully, it was helpful for everyone
I think
who's
so.
listening in. And yeah, best of luck. Looking forward to maybe doing this in person one day.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye. Thank you all for being with us. Bye.